In the meantime, Tesla sells more electric vehicles than any other car maker in the world, but for the first time since 2020, Tesla sales are down. Experts say it's a troubling sign for the broader EV market, where demand is lagging, even as the Biden administration pushes more of them to American consumers. Let's bring in Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. Mr. Secretary, good to have you with us on this Tuesday afternoon.
Thanks for having me on.
Let me just pursue that, if I could, with you. Tesla sales fell 8.5% the first quarter of this year. Ford this week is laying off 2/3 of its workforce at the F-150 electric Lightning plant. It's also scaling back a battery production facility because of sagging sales. EV sales are nowhere near what this president wanted or expected, yet the administration continues to shove them down consumers' throats. Why?
Well, let's be clear. Consumers have wanted and purchased more EVs every single year than the year before. And, Tesla is facing more competition as GM and Ford and Stellantis and other competitive players start to make sure they get a piece of the EV market. Let's be clear that the automotive sector is moving toward EVs, and we can't pretend otherwise. Sometimes when these debates happen, I feel like it's the early 2000s, and I'm talking to some people who think that we can just have landline phones forever. The reality is that the automotive sector is moving toward EVs, and the U.S. can either fall behind China or we can claim the lead. President Biden wants to make sure that those EVs are made in America, especially, again, as more Americans choose EVs every single year than the year before. We've got to make sure that those are made on American soil in places like northern Indiana, where I grew up, places like Michigan, where I live right now. During the Trump administration, China was really able to build an advantage in the EV market, and obviously not because they're big environmentalists over in China, just because that's the economically smart play. We've been working to make sure that that advantage comes back onto American soil.
Yeah, Mr. Secretary, it's Sandra here, and we really appreciate you coming on the show. When you look at the market here, and those who have watched markets for most of their lives, like many of us, we think, why are we pushing something that's just not ready? I mean, we have Bjorn Lomborg on the show, as you probably read his pieces in the Wall Street Journal often. He's not a climate change denier, but he is somebody who points out that this is just a market that's just not ready yet. He says we should allow innovation to push this, right? And that we should bring these cars along to the point where there's something that people want, that American consumers want to go buy. But right now, they're just not affordable. They're extremely expensive. The electricity obviously uses fossil fuels anyway to power these vehicles. So, is this just premature, this push right now?
Yeah, these are all really interesting and important questions. But I would say we know it's not premature because more Americans every single year choose electric than the year before. And if you look at the surveys, it is extremely rare for anybody who has gone electric to want to go back to the old gas car technology. Now, look, to be clear, it's not for everybody and it's not happening overnight. Our goal is by the end of this decade, we're about half and half with new car sales. But the reason we can't just sit back and let this happen on its own pace is that there is a race going on. Either China or the United States will dominate the EV future. We want to make sure it's the United States. Now, the power question is interesting, right? As you mentioned, a lot of electricity is still generated by fossil fuels. But if you look at the science of it, what you'll see is that it is still more efficient, just as a matter of physics, to convert those fossil fuels into energy at a utility plant and then run it through transmission lines into a car than it is to burn it in 100 million individual car engines. Even the most efficient combustion engines rarely get beyond 30 or 40% efficiency. It's more than double that in terms of electric vehicles. Now, look, it's early, right? Think about where gas cars were in the kind of 1910s or 1920s. That's kind of where we're at right now with EVs, but we can't afford to fall behind China. And then you mentioned affordability. Remember, the number one way that we have supported EVs is by making them more affordable. That's what those tax credits are about. And that's one of the reasons why you've seen the prices get closer and closer to parity. So the more Americans can save, both buying an EV and then the savings that tend to come with owning one.
Yeah, they're still way up there in the stratosphere, though, in terms of price. You talked about there being a race. A race, though, In order for somebody to win a race, you've got to have the capacity to be able to do that. And we do not have the capacity in the U.S. electrical grid to win that race anytime soon. Here's what the Wall Street Journal editorial board said about the overall new demands from new technologies and green energy on the electrical grid. Projections for the U.S. electricity demand growth over the next 5 years have doubled from a year ago. The major culprits, new artificial intelligence data centers, federally subsidized manufacturing plants, and the government-driven electric vehicle transition. If you don't have the power to figure out and power all of those things, how do you ever win the race? Because we are not upgrading the electrical infrastructure grid at the rate that we need to keep up.
Well, we literally are upgrading the electric infrastructure grid, and
not
it's
at the rate
a strange
we need
moment
to.
for me because we're coming full circle on the debates from 2 or 3 years ago when the president was pushing his infrastructure package, and some people said, "Look, if it isn't roads and bridges, it isn't infrastructure." Obviously, I'm the transportation secretary. I love the fact that there are so many roads and bridges being improved with this, but it also included funding for the electric grid. Now, today's electric grid can handle today's electric vehicles, but you're right. We can't run tomorrow's vehicles or, frankly, tomorrow's economy on today's grid or yesterday's grid. That's why it's got to be upgraded. Now, at the end of the day, if we can get that right as a country, that's going to leave us better off. There are more ways to move electricity than there are to move electric, than there are to move liquid fuel. You know, that's why my house in Michigan, I can fill our hybrid plug-in electric with electricity. Obviously, I can't do that with gas at my house. So in the long run, we're definitely better off, but absolutely agree that we're going to have to put a lot of work into upgrading that grid. And of course, I'm very excited about the good paying jobs for electrical workers that will come with that work that our administration is funding.
All right, we're coming at you a few other big topics here, obviously with the president going to Baltimore. We're going to get on that in just a moment. But it seems like almost every day we hear about a plane being diverted. Something happens. I mean, we've got images of something dropping from planes out of the sky, a door coming off. We've got a scroll of all these incidents that have been happening, Mr. Secretary. And the New York Post is writing about Boeing's mess that will probably interfere with your summer travel. The ongoing drama with Boeing is poised to hamper travel in the coming months, experts warn, as airlines scramble to distance themselves from the embattled airplane maker. People want to know right now, is their family safe traveling on an airplane, Mr. Secretary?
Yeah, look, last night I stepped onto an airliner with my husband and our twin 2-year-old son and daughter. So I care about this not just as a policymaker, but as a passenger and as a parent. The bottom line is that flying on an airliner in America is the safest way to travel by far. But we never take that for granted. And that's part of why the FAA and our administration has been very aggressive with regard to Boeing. It is critically important that Boeing meet the absolute highest safety standards. And frankly, the FAA was not satisfied with what they saw when they went to the facility or engaged Boeing's senior leadership. Our administrator, Mike Whitaker, our FAA administrator, put Boeing on a 90-day clock. We're already about a month into that to put together a plan demonstrating that they can hit a different level of quality control. And we're not going to let them increase their production until they do.
And, Mr. Secretary, I just want to finish off here with a question about that bridge in Baltimore, because the president will be going there on Friday to take a look at the efforts to try to clear it out and get it rebuilt. How quickly can you get the bridge rebuilt? And then an ancillary question. When the Sunshine Skyway in Tampa Bay was knocked down in similar circumstances in 1980, islands were built around the towers so that no ship could ever run directly into the bridge. Why wasn't the Francis Scott Key Bridge ever retrofitted with islands so that the columns couldn't be hit by a container ship?
Well, there's a debate going on right now about whether any design feature currently known could have stopped a ship of that size. It was 248 million pounds impacting that pier. But as you mentioned, after the Sunshine Skyway incident in 1980, bridge design advanced quite a bit. Now, the Francis Scott Key Bridge was built before that, but some of those lessons are definitely being applied both for new bridge design and how to reinforce some of our older bridges. It's one of many, many reasons why we put such a priority on infrastructure when this administration first got here. And we are pursuing efforts to make many of America's bridges more resilient. I don't want to get ahead of the NTSB. They're investigating. Obviously, they'll have more to say both about the shipping side of this and the bridge side of this. But any insights that come to light through that investigation, definitely something that we've got to apply as a country to future generations generations of bridge design and policy.
Mr. Secretary, could you briefly give us a heads up what we might see from the president during his trip there on Friday, what his plans are?
Well, knowing President Biden, he is largely going to want to get to know the leaders and the just ordinary people who are impacted by this, the rescuers who played such a critical role in dealing with the immediate aftermath. I know he's very focused on making sure that Governor Wes Moore gets the support that he needs. I'm also guessing that he will have a lot of very detailed questions, and I say that just because a couple of days after the incident, I was in the Oval Office with the Vice Commandant of the Coast Guard, and he had a lot of detail-oriented questions about what's it going to take to get the channel back open, what's it going to take to get the bridge back up, and I think he wants to know that every possible tool in the federal toolkit is helping the city of Baltimore and helping the state of Maryland as Governor Moore works to get that bridge back up and that port back open.
Mr. Secretary, we appreciate your time. One more quick question, if we could. Department of Transportation is promulgating a new rule about long trains requiring 2 crew members to be on a long train. The rule, I imagine, falls out of the disaster in East Palestine, Ohio. But there were 3 crew members on that train. So how will this new rule avoid something like that happening in the future?
Yeah, this isn't just about any one incident. This is about common sense. We were working on this before East Palestine. We certainly supercharged our work after what happened there, as we are on a number of different areas around rail safety. I think a lot of Americans would be surprised to find out that until this morning, there was no rule saying that you had to have more than one person on a train, even as these trains, sometimes with hazardous material on them, sometimes 2 miles long or longer, go through communities like East Palestine, Ohio, like South Bend, Indiana, where I grew up. And look, again, to me, this is just common sense. I'm a little bit shocked that the railroad industry lobby wants to be able to strip away the second worker on some of these trains, although they've managed to strip away a lot of workers, which is part of how they become so incredibly profitable, potentially at the expense of other priorities like safety. So, this isn't the only thing we're doing on rail safety. We think it's an important common sense step. I was disappointed that the railroad lobby today said that this was overreach, because to me this is pretty basic. But definitely not the only thing that matters, definitely not enough. It's why I'm continuing to renew our call for Congress to act on the bipartisan Railway Safety Act. It's still waiting its turn in Congress. It's been more than a year since East Palestine. I got to say, a lot of people, including a lot of Republican members of Congress who were quick to come on this network and had a lot to say in those first days after East Palestine, they are nowhere to be found when it comes to going on the record on this Railway Safety Act. I think it's time to get that act through Congress. I believe it would save lives.
Mr. Secretary, I really appreciate you coming on America Reports today. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate you having me on. Thanks very much.
All right. Hope to see you again. Thank you.
All right.
In the soft embrace of morning light, rocky and rugged, hopefully sight, a whisper of promise, a sense so sweet, reviving energy with every heartbeat. Oh yeah, stumbling down the stairs with grace, favorite mother, cherished embrace. Each sip, a dance of enchantment, caffeine's elixir, a daily enchantment. The morning sun, a gentle caress, bathing the world in warmth no less. A symphony of flavors in every pore, awakening senses, a ritual to adore. The kitchen hums a quiet tune, as dreams unfold, not too soon. Pouring the elixir, stories take flight. In the world of coffee, my spirit alights. I'm a cradled, a vessel of tales. Each sip, a dialogue as morning unveils. Bitterness, a new world of tales. As the day unfolds, a caffeinated tale. In morning symphony, where moments prevail. Coffee, my companion in the sunrise quest. In the ritual of morning, my eternal zest. The world awakens, a canvas so bright. In the palette of dawn, a captivating sight. A dance of flavors, a morning trance. In the world of coffee, life's sweet romance.